Welcome back to Nightcap. On this episode, we're going to be reviewing PipeCast. Let's check out that blend.
All right, what we have here is Peterson, formerly Dunhill's Nightcap. Now, it's very similar to Early Morning Pipe, as it is a kind of counter blend, whereas Early Morning Pipe is for smoking in the morning, maybe with a cup of coffee or tea. This is to be smoked at the end of the day, maybe with a a glass of wine, or more probably bourbon or whiskey or any type of liquor like that. But what this is made up of is red Virginia, bright Virginia, a little bit of Perique, Latakia, and Orientals. Now, what makes this a little bit different from early morning pipe is that added bit of Perique. And as far as it looks very similar to early morning pipe, just maybe a little bit darker. I'm thinking maybe the Latakia is kind of bumped up a little bit. And of course the Perique is a dark leaf as well, so that's going to add in some darkness. But you can still see, that bright Virginia and those Orientals poking through, as well as the red Virginias. So let's get over there and see how it smokes.
Well, that was the blend. So, Patrick, what you think about PipeCast?
It's this awful show on YouTube. I'll tell you what.
Two obnoxious guys talking way too much about stuff that no one cares about.
Oh, we have to talk about English blands. Bunch of Southern boys who don't know what they're talking about. But no, Nightcap is what we're here to talk about. I haven't had Nightcap in so long. I remember, if you go back, it probably was an audio only episode. It was the Christmas episode of where we covered Golden Days of Yore.
Yeah.
I had created, I think it was all the ingredients of Nightcap. I didn't know the percentages, but it was all the ingredients of Nightcap minus the Latakia, and I called it Night Slap.
Night Slap.
And I don't know what that has to do with anything, but I think it's because I blended it and put it in a tin empty tin of Nightcap that I had. So I hadn't smoked Nightcap in probably 2 years. So Nightcap, right? I've always said, this is no surprise, right? Artisan's Blend is my preferred English, Balkan, whatever you want to call it. If we're going by, Balkan being a kitchen sink, right? But heavy English, right? Artisan's Blend is my go-to, and Nightcap has always been kind of like, it's similar, right? I mean, I would probably gravitate to Nightcap, but since they're so similar, and I kind of like Artisans a little bit more, and Artisans is usually cheaper, I just go Artisans, right? Mm-hmm. So, so this is I've been smoking Nightcap a little bit. This is a pillar, by the way. If you didn't know, this is a pillar episode. I've been smoking a little bit of it, and I'll tell you what. Up until right now, when I just lit it back up, it's kind of gone down in my ranking. It kind of just wasn't doing everything, because we've had Artisans recently. We did a review of it, and the thing that makes Artisans so great is that you have your smoky campfire, awesome Latakia flavoring, but you have all this, just all the components are just good quality tobacco that just linger underneath, and they show up from time to time, and they just really Nightcap has a very similar upfront flavor, right? The Latakia is very similar to Artisan's Blend, but I think the underneath and the components underneath aren't as good. Like I said, I used to think that it and Artisan's Blend were almost interchangeable, like this was just a close second. I think it's kind of dropped down for me a little bit. I think it's fallen behind HH Latakia Flake. I think that's a better English now, in my opinion. This has fallen further away from Artisans. It still is really good, and it's a really solid, heavy English blend. And it's just, I don't know, maybe I'm getting more accustomed to picking up on the different other leaf that is showing up in blends.
Yeah.
You know, because I've been smoking a little bit longer and it's starting to. And I just I think Artisan's other components outside of Latakia are just higher quality and a better proportion probably. But I mean, Nightcap still does everything. It checks all the boxes. I mean, it's got Latakia, it's got Perique, it's got Virginia Orientals. It has everything that a heavy English should have. But yeah, I think it's a little bit less than Artisan though. And I hate to say that because I love being able just to say, well, they're both the same. Just get whichever one.
Get whichever one
you know, are you more of a Peterson Dunhill kind of person, or do you like this oddball Ashton's blend, right? So yeah, I don't know. I like I said, it's still good. I would always recommend Nightcap, but it's kind of fallen down for me. I think you had mentioned in a video recently that like Solani kind of fell down for you, not because Solani got worse, but just more blends came in and started not in the realm of early, but just like your top 10 favorite blends.
Right.
You know, Solani's kind of fallen because more blends have come in,
Right.
Like Aberrant and others.
Yeah, things happen. I mean, things move and your palate changes.
Yeah.
And with Nightcap, Nightcap was one of the first blends of pipe tobacco I ever smoked. This was so if you've been around for a long time, you know that there was a time where STG removed sales of Nightcap from the American market, then reintroduced it. The pre-removal is when I smoked it. So it wouldn't have been Murray's. It would have been post-Murray's, pre-removal. So there was this window there where Nightcap was being sold in the States before it got taken off the market and then made a return. And I smoked it there. And I didn't know what I was smoking. I knew that it was strong. I kind of got that I was smoking a pipe tobacco. It's confusing when you go back and you smoke English for the first time. You're like, there's a lot going on here, and you really, at that point in time, I was really more of a cigarette smoker anyway. So I didn't really know what I had gotten myself into. I was more familiar with cigars and cigarettes than I was with pipe tobacco, and this was sort of the creme de la creme of pipe tobacco. Someone was just like, yeah, this is the best, you're going to smoke it and you're going to love it. And I smoked it and I just was like, am I loving it? I just didn't know, you know. So I smoked a 10 of it then, and I was like, well, you know, whatever. And I just moved on. Of course, what I consider my first legitimate foray into pipe tobacco ended up being Artisan's blend, where I sort of was starting to understand what pipe tobacco was all about, or at least when I was starting to curate smoking as something that I would do. I smoked Artisan's blend, and I smoked it's golden sliced. What is it called? Dadgummit.
Orlick Golden Slice?
No, it's not.
Oh, Reiner Gold.
Reiner Gold. Thank you. Reiner Gold and Artisan's blend were the first two pipe tobacco blends that I really kind of fell for, that I was introduced to, and I smoked them a lot. Of course, then you sort of move your way. At the time, you would have moved your way into McClelland, and I just started smoking everything, and that's how I developed. But Nightcap was the first, and I didn't return to it for many years because, one, I think it was taken off the market for a while.
Yeah.
And then when I finally got my hands on it again, I was like, well, this is really good.
Yeah.
I don't think at the time I did much in the way of comparing it to Artisan's blend, but they're comparable. Now we're in such a different ball game, you know, going on what would be, man, like, what is it, 18 years later or something like that, you know. Now things are so different. I think that you could find a better Nightcap than Nightcap. A good example would be Quiet Nights. I think it's got more going on for it. Interestingly enough, this turn with this 10, I noticed a caramel flavor that I had never noticed before. It ain't super in front. It's not like they topped it with caramel. I just noticed this sort of buttery sweet kind of burnt caramel flavoring that was in there, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I'd never noticed before. And that might just be me. I know it definitely wasn't anything in my pipe, because this pipe in particular has only ever smoked heavier Latakia blends and Balkan blends, but I thought that was pretty interesting. I still think it's a stalwart. I think it's a staple. I think it's a pillar. I think that it's definitely something I recommend all the time to people who are getting started, because why not send them to the granddaddy of heavy or Balkan blend Latakias? You know, that's the way it is. And SCG has never done anything that has made me question their blending techniques or their tobacco leaf.
No.
But I think I unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because like you never want to age out of a tobacco. You never want to find yourself smoking and being at the other end of something that you used to like or used to really like. But I think I sort of have aged out of this a little bit. It's still good. It still holds all the characteristics of things that I like. Heavy with a peppery retro hell. It has a creaminess that sort of ebbs and flows with it, and the smokiness is still there. It's got a subtle, bitterness that it gets overtaken a lot by the sweet creaminess, and then that smokiness just keeps layering and layering and layering, and it's really enjoyable. But I think now I can get more consistent flavoring from something else than this.
Yeah.
But that's not a knock. This is still a high end. When we're talking like super high end, you're talking about a top 10 list, maybe.
Yeah.
Does it make that list? I don't think so.
Well, yeah, it definitely wouldn't make mine because.
And you gotta think too. Like if you go back 15 years, there wouldn't have been an aromatic in a top 10 list.
No.
And there probably wouldn't have been a Burley either.
Yeah.
Now I have Burleys in my top 10. I definitely have Lakeland Aromatics in my top 10. And they end up in Virginia's. Not that Virginia wouldn't have been there, but I mean, it's easier to root out Latakia than it is to keep them.
Which is weird, in my opinion.
I don't think it's as weird as you think. I think that Latakia is complex, but it's not as satisfying as the blends I just discussed.
I say that's weird because in the realm, I guess if you're just talking Englishes, right? So most of the time when you're talking Englishes, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about Latakia, right? Like, and so because Virginia's basically in everything.
Yes.
Burley is in a lot of things. Perique's in a lot of things.
Yes.
But Latakia never really is in anything other than English or Scottish.
Right.
So, why I say that's weird is Virginia's Virginia, straight Virginia. Like there's not. You can have different people blending them, but like one blender usually doesn't have more than 2, if that, straight Virginias.
Right, but they'll have different toppings. They'll have different things to accent them. So,
but
and
English
things that really bring out or draw out that sort of candied taste of Virginia, or not, like for instance with Aberrant, and keep a more natural flavoring, a natural sweetness where it kind of has a tea quality to it, like an English tea.
Yeah.
So I think that the blender really does, push my likes and dislikes. And I think the older I get, the more I can see that. And I think when you're trying to keep something consistent over time, like Nightcap, that push for consistency actually probably neuters experimentation. And it's supposed to, because you want it to be the same over time.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I guess, like I was kind of what I'm getting at is, with Englishes, there's so much more levels of complexity that you could do. You could mess with your percentages a little bit. You could you could put more Paris. You could take less Paris. You could add in more Orientals. You could just use red Virginias or just use brights.
Yes.
You could stove the Virginias. You could throw in black Cavendish. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of things that you can do in an English that should make it should, from just looking at it on paper. If you're doing a top 10 list, there's more room, in my realm. I'm over here talking about how I don't like to have things that are too similar to one another.
Right.
Artisans and PipeCap is kind of an exception, but
PipeCap?
Nightcap. I'm just gonna start calling it PipeCap. There you go. We're gonna come out with a blend called PipeCap.
PipeCap.
Nightcap. You know, but there's a lot more room to have Englishes there because you can change those proportions. You can up the lattice key. You can pull the lattice key back. You can do all these things you would on paper. But like you said, I think straight Virginias are the king of tobacco, in my opinion. Like they're my favorite. Just full Virginia flake.
It definitely is the first tobacco, right?
Yeah, I mean it's the first tobacco, and it's just it's got the most flavor. Just of being one leaf, it's got a lot of. I mean, well, it's bright and red, but regardless, it's the same leaf. And you know you can get so much flavor out of that.
Right.
Burleys are you can get you know if you know how to do it right,
Yep.
you can get something really good. So yeah, I mean I get what you're saying. It's kind of like while you can mess with Latakia and you can mess with your proportions, they're pretty dominant no matter what the proportion is. You know it's there, and so I kind of see what you're saying. And you know Nightcap might have been on a top 10 list for me, but it's definitely not anymore. I think, you know, Artisans would be, and H.H. Latakia, and even Quiet Nights would make it before Nightcap would now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still a good blend. It's still a pillar. It's still one that should be recommended to anybody and everybody who hasn't had it.
Definitely.
But I think once you get to it, I think you could definitely find better.
I think
blends.
yeah. I think you can get a real good feel for this in 5/10s.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then after that, I think you could definitely graduate and have a good sense of what other things taste like, and you could really pin down what you really, really, truly like.
Yeah.
But this is still good.
But then if you're like me and you're like, okay, I want to return to that, I return to Artisan. Because
Right.
it takes that and it just adds a little bit more complexity.
But I think in the long run, you'll know what you like.
Yeah, in the long run. So, but yeah, so this kind of wraps up our 3 video series of the Dunhills. You know, when it comes to like a day in the life of a Dunhill English, I think that Nightcap is still the best of the 3 of early morning standard and Nightcap. I think Nightcap's still the better one. Really, the only one that I don't think is worth anybody's time is standard.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely agreeable.
But again, I think early morning does give you some uniqueness. If this is too Latakia-ish for you, then I think early morning pipe kind of fits that role a little bit better. That creamy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I think we both recommend it. Is it rotational? Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe not now. If you rotate based on a very specific number like 7 or 10, I don't think it would make it.
No. But yeah, that's Nightcap. So we hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you.